was Christmas Eve night. We always hosted Christmas Eve at our house when I was a kid. My grandparents, uncles, and my cousins would always come. This year I must have been like 12. My mom was making duck, as she always did on Christmas Eve. I was helping her cook and prepare this year, because my dad actually had a really bad cold and was trying to not touch anything or stay too close to anyone. Our family slowly started showing up one by one. My Uncle Joe first, with my cousins, Chris and Valerie. I remember the atmosphere vividly. It was one of those bitter, Midwestern winters where the wind howls against the siding, rattling the window panes like someone demanding to be let in. Inside, though, it was warm. The smell of the roasting duck grease and rosemary was heavy in the air, mixing with my grandfather's pipe tobacco. Because my dad was sick, and I mean really sick, feverish and barely lucid, he was quarantined in the master bedroom upstairs. He had taken some heavy-duty flu medication around 4 p.m. and passed out cold. My mom had given me strict instructions. Don't go in there unless it's an emergency, and if you do, wear a mask and wash your hands. Around 7 p.m., the house was packed. There were about 15 of us. The noise level was incredible laughter, the clinking of glasses, the TV blaring some parade rerun. But despite the chaos, I felt a weird sense of unease. You know that feeling when you're playing hide and seek, and you know someone is right behind you, but you can't see them? It was like that. A prickling on the back of my neck. I was in the kitchen grabbing more ice for my aunt when I first noticed it. Our kitchen had a sliding glass door that looked out into the backyard. Beyond the patio light, it was pitch black, just an endless void of falling snow. I happened to glance at the glass, using my reflection to fix my hair, when I saw something move in the yard. It wasn't a small movement, like a raccoon or a branch. It was a tall, dark shape passing quickly past the edge of the light, heading toward the side of the house where the basement bulkhead was. I froze, the ice bucket cold in my hands. I squinted, pressing my face to the glass, cupping my hands around my eyes to cut the glare. Nothing. Just the white, untouched snow, except for a disturbed patch near the fence. "Lucas? You okay, kid?" I jumped. It was my cousin Chris. He was 16, playing the role of the cool older cousin who was bored by family gatherings. He was leaning against the fridge, holding a soda. I thought I saw someone in the backyard," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. Chris scoffed, shaking his head. "It's a blizzard out there, Luke. Probably a deer. Or Santa, if you still believe in that junk." He laughed and walked away, back toward the living room. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the feeling in my gut didn't go away. It just tightened. About 20 minutes later, my mom asked me to bring a glass of water and some crackers up to the landing outside my parents' door, just in case Dad woke up and needed them. I grabbed the tray and headed for the stairs. The noise of the party faded instantly as I climbed the carpeted steps. The second floor was dark, save for a nightlight in the hallway. It was much colder up here, away from the oven and the body heat of the guests. I set the tray down on the small table outside the master bedroom. I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear my dad's heavy, congested snoring. It was a rhythmic, rattling sound. But then, underneath the snoring, I heard something else. It came from above, the attic. Our attic wasn't a finished room. It was just insulation, beams, and dust. The only way up was a pull-down hatch in the ceiling of the hallway. About 10 feet away from where I was standing, I stared at the hatch. The white cord dangled innocently in the semi-darkness. I held my breath, listening. It was soft, incredibly soft, but distinct. Someone, or something, was shifting weight up there. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I turned and practically ran down the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. I burst into the kitchen, breathless. "Mom," I hissed, pulling on her apron. She was carving the duck, sweat on her brow. "Not now, Lucas. I'm trying to get this plated before it gets cold," she said, not looking at me. "Mom, there's someone in the attic." I heard walking. She stopped carving and looked at me, exasperated. "Lucas, it's an old house. The wind is 40 miles an hour tonight. The beams are settling. Please, go put the napkins on the table." "But, go," she said, pointing with the carving knife. I went. I did what I was told because I was 12, and I didn't want to make a scene. I sat at the kids' table, surrounded by my younger cousins who were arguing over toys. I tried to eat, but the duck tasted like ash. Every time the house groaned, I flinched. After dinner, we moved to the living room to open presents. This was usually my favorite part. The tree was lit up, the fire was crackling, and everyone was happy. But I couldn't take my eyes off the staircase in the foyer. From where I sat on the floor, I had a direct line of sight to the bottom of the stairs. I kept waiting for my dad to come down, looking for water. But he never did. Around 9:30 p.m., the adults were getting tipsy on eggnog and wine. Uncle Joe was telling a loud story, laughing hysterically. The volume in the room was deafening. I needed to use the bathroom. The downstairs powder room was occupied. I could hear my Aunt Karen retching. She had too much wine, so I had no choice. I had to go upstairs. I walked to the foyer. I looked up the dark staircase. It looked like a tunnel into a black mouth. Don't be a baby, I told myself. Mom is right, it's just the wind. I climbed the stairs, one by one. The air got colder with every step. When I reached the top landing, I froze. The attic hatch. Before, the hatch had been flush with the ceiling. Now, it was cracked open about 2 inches. A slice of absolute darkness peered out from the gap. I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead. I stared at that black gap, waiting for a hand to slide out, for an eye to peek through. Then, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a creak. It wasn't the wind. It was a cough. A wet, stifled cough. It didn't come from the attic, and it didn't come from my dad's room. It came from the guest bedroom at the end of the hall, the room that was supposed to be empty. The door was cracked open just a sliver, and the light from inside was off. I should have run. I should have screamed for Uncle Joe. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I crept forward, inching toward the guest room door. I needed to know. I reached the door frame and peered into the darkness of the room. The curtains were open, and the moonlight reflecting off the snow outside illuminated the room in a ghostly blue hue. The bed was empty. The closet was closed, but standing in the corner, pressed tight against the wall so he couldn't be seen from the hallway, was a man. He was wearing dirty, dark clothes that looked wet. He was tall, gaunt, and he was holding something in his hand. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking out the window, watching the reflection of the family in the backyard glass, or maybe he was just waiting. Then, slowly, as if he sensed my presence, his head began to turn. His movement was jagged, like a marionette being pulled by the wrong strings. When his face finally came into the light, my breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't a monster. It was a man, but he looked wrong. His skin was gray and pulled tight against his skull. His eyes wide and unblinking, rimmed with red. He had a patchy, unkempt beard that was matted with what looked like dried food and saliva. He didn't scream. He didn't lunge. He just stared at me with this hollow, dead expression. Then, very slowly, he raised a dirty, trembling finger to his lips. Shh. The sound was wet and guttural. That broke the spell. A primal, electric jolt of terror shot through my spine. I didn't think, I just reacted. I spun around, my socks slipping on the hardwood floor, and scrambled toward the stairs. Dad, Mom, Uncle Joe, I screamed, my voice cracking, shrill and desperate. I heard heavy footsteps behind me, fast, heavy bootfalls thudding against the floorboards. He was chasing me. I hit the top of the stairs and practically threw myself down them. I missed the third step, my ankle twisting painfully, and I tumbled the rest of the way, crashing into the foyer wall with a loud thud. The music in the living room stopped instantly. The laughter died. Lucas? My mom's voice called out from the living room, sharp with worry. I scrambled backward on my hands and butt, kicking away from the stairs, staring up at the darkness of the second floor. I expected to see him standing there at the railing, looming over me, but the landing was empty. There's a man! I was hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face. There's a man in the guest room. He chased me. The family flooded into the foyer. My mom was first, followed by Uncle Joe and my dad, who had stumbled out of his room, looking pale and confused. wrapped in a robe. Wait, Dad was downstairs? What are you talking about? Uncle Joe asked, his face flushed with wine but his eyes serious. Upstairs, in the guest room. He was hiding in the corner. I pointed a shaking finger at the ceiling. He has a knife, or something sharp. He told me to shush. The adults exchanged glances. He's just a kid seeing things. Look. Lucas, nobody is upstairs except your father, my mom said, reaching out to touch my shoulder. No, Dad is right there. I pointed at my father, who was leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen, looking groggy. I came down 5 minutes ago to get water. My dad rasped, his voice wrecked. I've been in the kitchen. That hit me harder than the fall. If Dad was downstairs, then the sounds I heard in the master bedroom, the sounds I thought were his snoring, weren't him. He was in the attic, I whispered, the realization making me nauseous. He came down from the attic. Uncle Joe didn't hesitate this time. He grabbed the heavy fireplace poker from the living room stand. Chris, stay here with the women and kids. Call the police. Now. Joe, be careful, Aunt Karen cried out. My uncle marched up the stairs, moving with a terrifying purpose. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I huddled against my mom, watching the staircase. For a long minute, there was silence, just the sound of the wind battering the house. Then, we heard a shout. Hey, stop! A massive crash echoed from upstairs, the sound of glass shattering. He went out the window! Uncle Joe roared from the guest room. Get to the back door! Chaos erupted. My cousins started crying. Chris ran to the back sliding door, but he was too scared to open it. By the time the police arrived 10 minutes later, the house was surrounded by flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the snow. They searched the backyard, the woods, and the neighborhood, but the blizzard had already covered most of the tracks. The man was gone, but what they found inside was far worse than simply finding a burglar. When the officers went up to the attic, they found a nest. It was a pile of old insulation, stolen blankets from our linen closet, and clothes that had gone missing weeks ago. There were candy wrappers, empty water bottles, and this is the part that still messes me up, a small hole carved into the drywall that looked directly into the bathroom ventilation shaft. From there, you could hear everything in the house. The police estimated he had been living up there for at least 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He was there while we watched TV. He was there while we slept. He was there while I was home alone after school. But the most chilling detail came from the guest room where I found him. The police found the object I had seen in his hand, dropped on the floor near the shattered window. It wasn't a knife. It was a roll of duct tape and a length of rope. He wasn't just hiding. He was waiting for the party to end. He was waiting for everyone to go to sleep. My dad recovered from the flu, but he never recovered from the guilt. He sold the house 2 months later. We moved to a condo in the city, somewhere with no attic and a 24-hour doorman. I'm 25 now. I still love Christmas, but I spend it at my girlfriend's apartment. And every year, before I can relax, before I can open a single present, I have to check every closet, look under every bed, and make sure the attic hatch is sealed shut. Because I know that sometimes, the things that go bump in the night aren't ghosts. They are people. And they are waiting for you to look away. I've worked some pretty lousy winter jobs in my life, but nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to what happened 3 years ago, on Christmas Eve. I was 22, broke, freezing in my dented Honda Civic, and clinging to the hope that one more delivery run would keep my bank account from hitting zero. I was working for one of those gig economy courier apps, not food, not rides, just anything people wanted delivered. Groceries, dry cleaning, random boxes, last-minute gifts. Half the time I never even knew what I was hauling. I stayed on my college campus over winter break because I couldn't afford the flight home. Everyone else was with their families. I was alone, eating a stale 7-Eleven taquito in a parking lot while snow buried my windshield. It was 10:45 p.m. when my phone dinged. A priority rush request. Double pay. I almost ignored it. Snow was coming down in curtains, and my tires were nearly bald. But then, I saw the payout. $600. For one, delivery. My breath fogged in the car. I thought it had to be a glitch. Most runs paid $40 on a good night. $600 meant rent and groceries for a month. When you're broke, your survival instincts start negotiating with your better judgment. I hit accept. The pickup address was a quiet suburban home 2 miles away. Normal neighborhood. But when I pulled into the driveway, the garage door only lifted halfway, and a single, gloved hand slid a shoebox-sized package out under it. No greeting, no face. The garage door shut again immediately, leaving me alone with a red duct-taped box that felt heavier than it looked. I should have driven away right then. Instead, I placed it in the passenger seat and followed the GPS north 20 miles into the woods, toward a place called Blackwood Manor. Snow swallowed the road. Streetlights vanished. Towering pines crowded in on both sides like they were trying to smother the sky. The radio died, leaving nothing but my wipers scraping away the blizzard. It was nearly midnight when the GPS announced I had arrived, but I wasn't at a house. I was parked in front of a massive iron gate. Behind it was a gravel road, disappearing into forest so dark it felt bottomless. A keypad blinked on a stone pillar. The app instructions read, "Code is 1224. Drive to main house. Leave package on kitchen island. Door is unlocked." I hesitated. Everything about this job felt wrong, but $600 silenced every alarm bell ringing in my head. I punched in the code. The gates creaked open like something out of a horror movie, slow, reluctant, metal groaning like it hadn't been used in years. The road twisted another mile before the woods opened into a clearing, revealing a structure that made my skin crawl. Blackwood Manor wasn't a cozy forest house. It wasn't even a mansion. It was a cold, brutalist block of concrete and glass sharp angles, floor-to-ceiling windows, and not a single sign of life. No Christmas lights, no decorations, no interior glow, just darkness and silence. I left my engine running. The snow crunched under my boots as I carried the red-taped box up the concrete steps. The front door was made of heavy, solid wood. I expected it to be locked, but when I pulled the handle, it opened effortlessly. "Hello?" My voice echoed through a cavernous foyer, swallowed by darkness. I used my phone flashlight to find the kitchen. Polished steel appliances, spotless counters, and an immaculate marble island. It looked less like someone's home and more like a showroom. There wasn't a single sign that anyone had cooked, eaten, or lived here. I set the package on the island. Okay, done. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A laptop, open, on the far end of the island. Its screen glowed faint blue in the dark room, displaying 4 surveillance camera feeds. Camera 1, the front gate. Camera 2, the driveway. Camera 3, the front porch. Camera 4, the kitchen. On camera 4, I saw myself standing there in real time, staring at the monitor. Only the timestamp was 10 seconds behind, a delayed feed. Before I could process that, a chat window popped onto the laptop screen. Words typed themselves into the messaging box. A robotic text-to-speech voice filled the kitchen. "Open the box, Lucas." My blood froze. I hadn't told anyone my name. The app never displays full names, not to customers, not to anyone. "I'm just the delivery guy," I said aloud, my voice cracking. "I'm leaving now." The text on the screen erased itself and reappeared instantly, like whoever was typing wasn't using fingers. I wouldn't go out that door if I were you. Fear hit my stomach like a punch. I sprinted to the front door and grabbed the handle. It didn't budge. It didn't feel locked. It felt sealed, like someone had bolted it from the outside with steel. I rammed my shoulder into it. Nothing. The house remained silent until a low mechanical hum vibrated through the walls. Electricity? Locks engaging? Something else? My phone buzzed. A notification from the courier app. Order incomplete. Please follow instructions. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Back in the kitchen, the laptop screen began flashing. Open the box. I stared at the red-taped shoebox. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my keys as I sliced through the duct tape. Inside was a nest of packing peanuts, and a single, old Motorola walkie-talkie, already turned on. Static hissed softly. I didn't want to touch it, but before I could decide, the static cleared, and a man's voice, real, close, almost whispering, came through. "Lucas, I've been watching you for a long time. Now, look up." My heart pounded as I slowly raised my head to the lofted walkway above the kitchen. A shadow stood there. As my eyes adjusted, the figure solidified. A man in a deep red Santa suit. Not cheap fabric, luxurious velvet, trimmed with thick fur. But instead of the hat and beard, he wore a black ballistic mask that covered everything except his eyes. In his hands, a crossbow. He aimed it down at me. The walkie-talkie crackled again. "Run, Rudolph." The bolt fired with a whip crack. I dove behind the marble island as the arrow shattered the countertop, spraying shards of stone across the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scrambled into the hallway just as another bolt tore through a wine bottle behind me. The glass exploded like a gunshot. I sprinted blindly through the dark corridors, trying locked door after locked door. Every exit was sealed. Every window was reinforced. Every room felt colder and darker than the last. This wasn't a house. It was a hunting ground, and I was the prey. I don't know how I kept running. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe it was blind panic, or maybe it was the realization that nobody even knew where I was, nobody except the man in the Santa suit stalking me through his concrete labyrinth of a house. I burst into a massive den at the back of the manor. Floor-to-ceiling glass looked out into a forest so dark it felt bottomless. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a brass lamp, and slammed it against the glass. The lamp bent. The window didn't even crack. The walkie-talkie in my hand hissed. Then came his voice again, calm, amused, like he was giving stage directions. "Did you really think I'd make it that easy? The exits are sealed, the windows are reinforced. But I'm a fair man, Lucas. There's one way out." I didn't respond. "A chimney," he said softly, so to speak. I dropped the lamp and backed away from the window. My breath fogged in the cold air of the room. It felt like the entire house was deliberately kept at a temperature just low enough to make you desperate. I needed a weapon, anything. The den was barren modern furniture, shelves with no books, a fireplace with no tools. He had stripped the room of anything useful on purpose. But behind the bar, I found a glass whiskey decanter. Thick, heavy, something that could at least slow him down. I crouched behind the counter, gripping it so tightly I thought it might shatter in my hands. For a moment, the manor fell silent. Then I heard it. Jingle bells. Soft, rhythmic. Getting closer. Each step accompanied by the faint metallic chime of a costume accessory. My lungs froze mid-breath. "I asked for a pony this year," the voice whispered through the walkie, "but I got a courier instead." He was right outside the doorway now. I pressed myself against the cabinet behind the bar, heart pounding so violently I was sure he'd hear it. Then the walkie erupted with shrill feedback. "Found you." But he didn't come through the den doorway. He came through a hidden servant's door behind the bar, one I hadn't even realized existed. His massive silhouette filled the narrow frame. No crossbow this time, just a hunting knife. I swung the whiskey decanter in pure terror. It connected with the side of his mask in a bone-jarring crunch. He stumbled, crashing against the bar shelves. I didn't wait for a second swing. I vaulted over the counter and sprinted back into the hallway, the walkie-talkie crackling wildly in my hand. My only thought was the garage. Houses like this always had a garage, and garages had doors, regular doors. I found it just off the kitchen and slammed it shut behind me, twisting the lock. Pitch black. I fumbled for the switch. The fluorescence buzzed to life overhead, revealing an empty concrete garage. Except for one thing, a workbench, and above it, a pegboard. Tacked onto it were a few dozen red envelopes, identical in color and material to the duct tape on the package I'd delivered. Next to each envelope was a driver's license. Different names, different ages, different states. A cold dread trickled down my spine. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't random. This was a collection. The walkie hissed. "It's a tradition, Lucas. A hobby, you could say." A loud bam rattled the door behind me as he slammed into it. Then another. Wood splintered around the lock. I grabbed a metal crowbar off the workbench and ran to the main garage door. I jammed the crowbar under the bottom lip and pulled with everything I had. It didn't move. He had electronically locked it, just like everything else. The door behind me cracked. A hunting knife blade pierced through, sawing at the broken wood. "Let me in, Lucas," he crooned. "We haven't opened your present yet." My eyes darted around the garage. No car, no exit, no windows. Then I saw the garage door opener, the motor unit on the ceiling. If I could pull the release cord, I dragged a paint bucket under it and climbed up, reaching for the dangling emergency release just as the interior door exploded inward. Splintered wood rained onto the floor. He stepped through the wreckage, dragging his cracked mask off to reveal pale, bruised skin underneath. His eyes were wild, furious, locked onto me like prey. I dropped from the bucket just as he lunged. The knife slashed across my calf. I hit the concrete, screaming, leg on fire. He towered over me, raising the knife for the kill. And then, a blinding white light flooded the garage. We both froze. Headlights. A car had pulled up outside, illuminating the small frosted windows of the garage door. A muffled voice called from outside. Uber Eats delivery for Bad Santa? For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other. He had ordered food. In the middle of hunting me, this psychopath had ordered a late-night snack. He turned toward the door, confused, and I didn't waste the moment. I swung the crowbar upward with every ounce of strength I had left. It connected with his kneecap. The crack echoed like a gunshot. He collapsed, howling in an animalistic roar that didn't sound human. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the pedestrian side door. I tore the deadbolt open and nearly collided with the stunned Uber Eats driver. "Run!" I screamed. "Go! Go now!" He didn't ask questions. He dropped the bag and sprinted with me toward his Toyota Camry. I dove inside the passenger seat. "Tell me you have the keys." He did. The car fishtailed violently as he floored it. Snow sprayed behind us. Through the rear window, I saw the garage door rolling open. The masked man dragged himself into the snow, screaming my name into the darkness. We smashed through the wooden gate arm and didn't stop until we reached the police station 20 miles away. Officers raided the property within the hour. They found the trophy room, the cameras, the hidden rooms, everything except him. Fresh snowmobile tracks led into the forest and vanished into miles of untouched wilderness. They never caught him. 3 hours later, Christmas morning, I sat in a hospital bed getting stitches in my leg. My phone vibrated. A bank deposit notification. $600. Pending. Before I could process that, another notification appeared. $5,000. Tip. Timestamped 3 a.m. The description read, "Good game. Until next year." I closed the account the same day, changed my name, moved across the country. But every Christmas Eve, without fail, I sit in my dark apartment with the lights off, a loaded gun on the table, and my phone face down, waiting. Because somewhere out there, I know he's still watching. And I know he thinks the game isn't over. Not yet. People make jokes about the elf on the shelf every December. Memes, pranks, goofy photos where the little red doll appears to wreak imaginary havoc. Kids laugh, parents play along, and by Christmas morning, the whole thing feels like a harmless tradition. But I don't laugh at those jokes. I don't keep those dolls in my house. Because when I was 7 years old, I learned that sometimes those dolls don't move because a parent picks them up. Sometimes they move because they're watching. Back in 1998, I was living alone with my mom in a huge, drafty Victorian house in upstate New York. The place always felt too big for just the two of us, creaky floors, echoing hallways, windows that whistled every time the wind picked up. My mom worked long night shifts as a nurse, so babysitters and long stretches of empty evenings were pretty normal for me growing up. 5 days before Christmas, on December 20th, she walked through the front door with a shopping bag and a forced smile that didn't match how exhausted she looked. "Look what I found, sweetie," she said, pulling out a bright red box. "The lady at the store said he watches to make sure you're good for Santa." Inside was the elf. Red felt body, plastic face. Permanently smiling, lips pulled too tight. Eyes wide open like it had been caught mid-surprise. "What's his name?" Mom asked, setting him on the fireplace mantel. I didn't hesitate. "Mr. Jingles." The first morning passed like a normal elf on the shelf routine. I woke up to find him sitting on the cereal box in the kitchen, as if waiting for breakfast. My mom laughed, shrugged it off, and poured my bowl of Cheerios. Magical. Funny. Harmless. But on the third night, everything changed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up thirsty. Kids don't think much. When they wander the house at night, they're half asleep, barely aware. I crept downstairs with my flashlight, expecting the usual silence of our living room, but the mantel was empty. Mr. Jingles wasn't where he'd been when I went to bed. I didn't panic. I figured my mom had moved him early for fun. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and poured myself some milk. The moment I closed the fridge door, I felt it, that shift in the air, heavy. Still, like the entire kitchen was holding its breath, my flashlight beam slid across the counter, and there he was, Mr. Jingles, sitting right next to the knife block. His body was turned toward me, his head tilted slightly left, a detail I knew hadn't been there earlier. It wasn't just a new position, it felt intentional. I whispered, "Mom?" Knowing full well she wouldn't answer. She was asleep. The house was silent. Against my better judgment, I reached out and touched the doll. His felt body should have been cool fabric in a cold kitchen. Instead, he was warm, human warm. I snatched my hand back and ran upstairs, heart thudding. In the morning, I told my mom everything. She just smiled and brushed it off. "You probably bumped him," she said, "and the heater vent could have made him warm." But I knew I hadn't, and the warmth had felt wrong. 2 days before Christmas, the worst snowstorm of my childhood slammed into our town. By 6 p.m., the wind sounded like a freight train outside, and then just as my mom was reheating dinner, the power snapped out. Pitch black house. Sudden, quiet. Then the scream of the wind returning through the chimney. She lit candles across the house, making the rooms glow unevenly from corner to corner. I sat on the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, trying to pretend I wasn't scared. "I'm going to check the breaker," my mom said. "Stay right here." End quote. She disappeared into the kitchen, opened the basement door, and went down. I listened until I couldn't hear her footsteps anymore. The living room felt different with the lights gone. The tree, unplugged and lifeless, cast strange shadows across the walls. The house had always been old, but without electricity, it felt ancient. I lifted my flashlight, swung it across the mantel. The elf wasn't there. I scanned the bookshelf next. He was there, perfectly posed between 2 photo albums. I blinked just once because something snapped against the window outside. When I opened my eyes again, the shelf was empty. Every hair on my arms lifted. I turned the flashlight slowly, every nerve screaming. That's when I heard it, a giggle, not a child's giggle, high-pitched, grainy, like something laughing through a throat full of sand. It came from under the coffee table. My hand trembled as I lowered the flashlight beam. 2 reflective plastic eyes stared back at me from the shadows. Mr. Jingles was standing upright, not sitting, standing, and in one tiny red hand, he held a long sewing needle. My breath locked in my throat. My legs refused to move. Then the doll took a step, a real step, jerky, unnatural like a marionette being yanked forward by invisible strings. Then another step, faster this time, closer to my feet. "Mom!" I screamed. Somewhere far below, something heavy thudded in the basement. Then nothing. I scrambled backward, tripping off the couch. The doll broke into a skittering run on all 4s, its felt limbs bending in ways that should have been impossible. I kicked it, hard. The doll flew across the room, hit the wall, and didn't fall. It clung to the wallpaper, climbed. Its head twisted around to face me. That plastic smile stretched just a little too far. I bolted for the kitchen. The basement door was shut, locked. "Mom, open the door!" I screamed, pounding it with both fists. From behind the door, I heard her voice, but it was wrong, flat, mechanical. "Let me out, Lucas." I froze. Something moved in the gap beneath the door, just an inch of space between the wood and the floor. I crouched down. A face stared back at me, but not my mother's. Round plastic cheeks, painted smile, wide, unblinking eyes. Another elf. I felt the room tilt. My stomach lurched. I spun around, and my breath tore out in a silent scream. On the counter stood a second doll, holding the largest knife from the block. On the fridge sat a third. From the chandelier hung a fourth, then more, and more. Dozens. Their scratchy voices rose in unison. "Naughty, naughty, naughty." The kitchen felt smaller by the second, like the walls were swelling inward. I backed into the counter, gripping the cold granite until my knuckles turned white. The dolls didn't leap at me. They moved in jerky, frame-skipping motions, like a stop-motion film someone forgot to render correctly. The one holding the butcher knife twitched forward, inch by inch. My lungs wouldn't work. My vision pulsed at the edges, dimming like someone was slowly turning a dial. My head thrummed with a heavy, rhythmic pressure that didn't feel like fear. It felt physical, like the air itself was just a little too thick to breathe. I reached behind me without looking and grabbed the first thing my fingers touched, a cast iron skillet from the drying rack. "Stay back," I whispered, though it sounded more like a slurred plea than a warning. The knife-holding doll lunged with a glitchy jerk. I swung with everything I had. The skillet connected with a sickening metal-on-ceramic crack that reverberated up my arm. The doll shot across the counter and hit the floor, but it didn't stop laughing. The sound was wrong, too big for its tiny body, too distorted. It crawled up the inside of my skull like static electricity. My legs buckled. I dropped to my knees, not because of fear, because my body simply wasn't obeying anymore. My muscles felt like they were turning to warm wax. Something was very, very wrong. I turned toward the basement door, hoping, praying my mom would burst through it, but the face staring out from beneath the door stayed, motionless, smiling. That's when my vision doubled, then tripled. Suddenly, the room swarmed with dozens, no, hundreds of red-suited elves, swaying like a sea of flickering hallucinations. I squeezed my eyes shut, but it didn't help. Their whispers stabbed through the darkness. "Naughty, naughty, sleep now, sleep." I tried to crawl, but the floor tilted sharply beneath me. My limbs trembled like they weighed 50 pounds each. Every breath tasted metallic, thick, wrong. I think I said, "Mom," but it came out as a mumble through a tongue that no longer shaped words. I turned my head just enough to see something climb onto my chest light, but solid enough to push the air out of my lungs. A doll, its needle raised, coming closer and closer to my eye. Blackness swallowed me before it touched me. When I opened my eyes, everything was white. White ceiling, white curtains, white sheets. A beeping sound ticked in rhythm to my pulse. A hospital. I felt something strapped to my face, an oxygen mask, forcing cool air into my lungs. Tubes in my arms. Weight in my limbs like they were filled with cement. "He's awake." I turned my head slowly. My Aunt Sarah was sitting beside me, her face blotchy from crying. She grabbed my hand like she was terrified to let go. "Sweetie, you're okay. You're safe. Just breathe." The word "Mom" caught in my throat before I could even form it. "She's alive," Aunt Sarah whispered, already anticipating the question. "She's in the next room in the hyperbaric chamber. The doctors say she'll recover." Aunt Sarah. I closed my eyes in relief until I remembered the basement door, the voice, the face, the dolls, the elves. I rasped through the mask. They moved. They had knives. They attacked us. A doctor stepped into view, his expression gentle but firm, the kind of look adults use when delivering truth kids don't want to hear. "Lucas, do you know what carbon monoxide is?" I shook my head weakly. "It's an odorless, colorless gas. When your power went out, the blocked chimney caused your furnace to backdraft. Your home filled with poison." He explained everything. The dizziness, the blurred vision, the hallucinations, the paralysis, the confusion. The brain, when deprived of oxygen, tries to make sense of misfiring neurons, he said. It creates vivid, terrifying images. He thought the dolls never moved, that the whispering was wind, that my mom's collapsed body against the basement door was the face I saw under the crack. It made sense. It all made sense. But then the part that didn't, I remembered the needle raised over my eye, the weight on my chest. The dolls arranged across the kitchen in deliberate, disturbing positions. Had I imagined everything? 3 days later, after we were cleared to leave, Aunt Sarah drove us back to the house to get some clothes before staying at her place. Fire crews had aired everything out, fixed the leak, taken photos. Walking inside felt like stepping into a crime scene from someone else's life. The kitchen was still a disaster. My overturned chair, the skillet on the floor. The fridge magnets scattered where I'd knocked into it. "You stay here," Aunt Sarah said. "I'll get your things." "No," I said. "I need to see." I stepped into the kitchen first, and the moment I looked at the counter, my blood went cold, because Mr. Jingles was there, lying on his side exactly where I had hit him, but duct taped to his tiny felt hand was the steak knife. Real duct tape, real knife, deliberately fastened. I walked forward slowly, my throat drying out with every step. On the chandelier hung another doll by a hangman's noose made of fishing line. 3 more sat in a circle on the floor. In the center lay a pile of rat poison pellets arranged in a smiley face. Behind me, Aunt Sarah gasped. A fire marshal who'd returned for a final inspection walked in behind her. "Did your officer set this up?" she asked, voice shaking. "No, ma'am," the marshal said. "These positions were documented the moment we entered. We assumed. Well, we assumed the boy did it during hallucinations." "I didn't," I whispered. "I didn't touch any tape. Or fishing line." The marshal turned toward the chimney's cleanout door. "We found the blockage," he said. "We thought it was ice." He opened the hatch and reached inside with a gloved hand. When he pulled it out, he froze, because he wasn't holding snow. Or branches. He was holding a stuffed Santa suit, thick, heavy, jammed into the flue to block it. Inside the suit were empty boxes. 12 empty Elf on the shelf boxes. Someone had stuffed the chimney on purpose. "Someone was on your roof," the marshal said quietly. "Someone blocked your chimney to poison the house, and someone staged this room." He scanned the dolls, knives, nooses, poison, and shook his head. "They didn't just want you dead. They wanted you terrified. We never found out who did it. No footprints. No fingerprints. No suspects. We never went back." But the part that still wakes me up at night came from the fire department's final report. When they found me unconscious on the kitchen floor, I wasn't alone. A doll was sitting on my chest, holding a needle, poised directly over my open eye. Not imagined, not hallucinated, photographed. And I still wonder every December when I see those dolls on store shelves whether the gas made me see things that weren't real, or whether the gas just slowed me down enough to see the things that were.